And we've gone from being basically a resource rent-based economy and just gradually morphed over the centuries into this very same high taxing, high land price system. I'm not saying it's going to destroy us, but I'm saying we've got there. Congratulations. The thing that we should know about these is that these booms is not only the height but the breadth. If you look at this current one, there's a sign that in no floor it turned down very, very slightly. It could even kick up again, but it must come down because it is a bubble. So let's define a bubble. In 1984 we had a real estate boom. It was one of these intermediate booms between the ones that I've marked. But we didn't have a recession in 1986. That was at a ratio of 18%. Empirically, I observe at any time, however, we reach 19% as a proportion of real estate sales to the economy, we have always had a recession. So we put our bubble line in at 19%. And the bubbles are obviously those little triangles peeking out above the 19% mark. You won't have a recession when it goes beyond that, but every time it cuts back below that, you will have a recession. Even in 1981, when it only reached 19.24%, that's the real estate market as against GDP. Real estate sales to GDP is the blue line here. You can see it trending upwards with the trend line through it. GDP growth, we saw before, they've been trending down anyway. I want to make the point that in my book, you can't resurrect GDP growth until real estate's growth resolve itself, until we purge some of the massive and unsustainable debt from the system. That has all to do with contractive winter. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, this is the pièce de résistance. Classical distribution of GDP in Australia. Just as the neoclassical economist likes to roll land and capital together, we've tried to disaggregate and to roll labour and capital together. In 2001, the Land Value Research Group commissioned former Treasury bureaucrat and tax expert Terry Dwyer to disaggregate our national resource rent. He did much better than we'd expected. He got it back to 1911. And you can see what's happened during that time. Land rent has grown from 9% to 27%. Well, when I say land rent, he also includes electromagnetic spectrum, etc., etc. Taxes have grown from 6% of the economy to 32%. The net incomes of labour and capital have dropped from 85% to 41%. We could say, well, that's the price of the more sophisticated social contract. It's not the price of the more sophisticated social contract at all. It's the price of kowtowing to the rentier class who are reaping the greater part of that 27% of the economy. Wouldn't I like to get, we're talking industrial relations before, wouldn't I like to get captains of industry and the unions together and bang their heads together and make a look at this 41%. They're far out of that, that's nothing. They want to get back some of their taxation and get some people, most of us sure, we've got an interest in this if we own our own home in this national resource rent there. But there is the Australia's top 100, BRW, 99% of them are property investors, property magnates, even the media is largely property based these days. Just have a look at the facts and yeah, the ones with the tippy-toeing around, and I can understand the question from the chap over here who said, why are we talking taxes? There is a big difference between resource rents and taxes. A big difference. Taxes are penalties on production. Resource rent collects a publicly created amount. Sure, we don't like paying it, but we should. Otherwise we're going to have these booms and busts that I'll point to. Further details from that classical GDP distribution chart. As a proportion of GDP since 1972, net incomes have declined 35%, taxes have grown by 25%, the resource rents have grown 125%. We're all flagellating ourselves saying, where on earth are we going to fund government with a declining workforce? Do you think it could be over resource rents, which are growing massively? I mean, Julian Disney says, in the case of the poor widow, we can look after the poor widow, but we've got to distinguish where we're getting our revenue from. Is it from taxes on people who are trying to do creative things, or is it from the leeches in society who are sucking in the tea of our natural resource rents? Of Australia's publicly created 180 billion in resource rents in 2002, magnificently we collected 19.2 billion or 10.7%. These are publicly created values. No individual created them, but the people that are creaming them off are a relatively small rentier class, plus we, the landowners, who own our own properties, not the poor. As rent seekers took 160.8 billion of community rent, this amount had to be made up from tax imposts upon the earned incomes of labour and capital. Declining net incomes and escalating taxes and rents therefore assist to explain, one, the widening wealth gap between the small rentier class, rent seekers who capture the greater part of economic rent, and the poor and the middle class. The growth of household debt from 289 billion in 1996 to 818 billion. Completely unsustainable. People won't be able to service that, but they've got to bear butt. And it's been financed largely from the wealth effect of increased land values. That is based upon the security of a bubble. Being worded with keep going. Now, the charter of the Reserve Bank of Australia is to ensure A, the stability of the Australian currency, B, the maintenance of full employment in Australia, and C, the economic prosperity and welfare of Australians. How does that charter sit with what I've shown you? Boom, bust, boom, bust, boom, bust. We've done figures on it, goes back 200 years in history. We've got figures from home and Western America taking back 200 years. Property went, property bust, no one wants to talk about it, and let's ignore that, let's ignore taxes on property. To his credit, Mr McFarlane actually stood on the steps of the Reserve Bank of Australia and said this property boom, this residential property boom, is not doing us any good. He went one hell of a lot further than any former government of the Reserve Bank. They usually wait until after the bubble burst and they knowingly say, oh yes, we went too far. He did it beforehand, but he and his Board of Governors have got to go further. They've got to demand from the Parliament of Australia the ability to levy a federal land tax. I don't like using the word tax. It's a federal charge on land values, resource values, that can be manipulated to stop these bubbles happening. And as the central banks of other nations are similarly pointed, we've got the similar problem. As I said, Australia is just a proxy for what's happening around the world, and we have magnificent land analyses. Finally, there is a vast educational void on the 27% plus of the economy, I'd say it's about 30%, that is William Petty's publicly created but now largely privately expropriated national resource rent. I hope I've shown that it is a missing link in understanding the cause and social consequences of our boom-bust economy. We capture other resource rents, such as those for mineral, fishing, forestry and electromagnetic spectrum licences much more easily than the annual value of our land, because, as Tim says, they're not such a politically sensitive issue. But those who loudly proclaim property rights in land need to see exactly why they also have a social responsibility in connection with landed property. We have shown that Australia is poised to tank into a major deflation, so the Reserve Bank of Australia needs to be directed urgently to apply and administer a federal charge on Australia's land values. Land revenues so derived must then be used to retire damaging taxation. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't take what is the community's for the community, then tragically, community, civil society is lost.